racial politics and presidential politics. I'm Ed Kelly, editor of the Oklahoman. With me from Washington is Chris Castile, chief of the Oklahoman's Washington Bureau and a frequent contributor here on News OK TV. Chris, as you know, one of the big stories in the presidential race this week, believe it or not, is the cover art of the New Yorker magazine, which shows Michelle Obama as what I would describe as an Angela Davis throwback and Barack Obama as a stereotypical Muslim. It's satire, or at least it's supposed to be satire, of course, but there was quite a bit of outrage. Does this hurt the Obamas as they try to convince Americans that they share the same values?
Ed, I'm sure it doesn't help. My faculty advisor, when I was at the student paper at OU, always used to caution us against using sarcasm and satire. And it's a question of how many people are going to get it, and what's the use of confusing a lot of people just to amuse a few. And clearly, most of the readers of the New Yorker magazine, 99.9%, will get it. But what about the rest? I once had a reader forward me an article from The Onion, the satirical newspaper The Onion, that said President Bush and former Mexican President Vicente Fox met at an El Chico in Washington to discuss giving California back to Mexico. I wrote her back and said, well, there's not an El Chico in Washington. But, the point is that, the readers of The Onion got it. It was a joke. But it gets out there on the internet, and people who don't understand what The Onion is or don't understand, what this picture of the Obamas is trying to portray, it doesn't help with those people that the Obamas definitely, these people who have to kind of make a leap of faith about voting for Obama, and they see this picture, or it just fuels whatever racist and, whatever else bigotry is out there. It certainly, you have to wonder kind of what they were thinking.
Okay, speaking of image, a new New York Times CBS poll that's out just today shows a sharp racial divide in the presidential race, with only 30% of white voters polled saying they have a favorable opinion of Barack Obama. Do you think these kinds of numbers help explain why Obama is planning trips to Iraq and the Middle East, even right in the middle of the presidential campaign, to shore up his credibility with voters?
Well, Ed, I think he's having to do all kinds of things to shore up his credibility with voters. That poll is interesting. It illustrated, again, the sharp divide in perceptions about race in this country, where right. I think it was close to 60% of whites thought racial relations were good, whereas, as you said, a minority of blacks did. And even though you've got Senator Barack Obama as the first African-American nominee for a major party for president, and it almost suggested that even if he's elected president, that a lot of blacks won't see that as progress. That's kind of hard to understand. But we saw in the primaries, as you remember, in some states, clear evidence of a racial divide in the vote, and no doubt there will be more evidence of that in the general election. But I think mainly really about his trips to Iraq and Afghanistan is questions about his experience. Here's a guy who spent more time as a state senator in Illinois than as a U.S. senator. His foreign policy experience, obviously, is very limited, and you're talking about crucial issues here that McCain really understands. And I'm sure a lot of swing voters who maybe haven't made up their mind not only about the nominee but about Iraq necessarily, what to do next, want to know that Senator Obama understands the issue, that he's done everything he can to educate himself about what's going to happen there in the next few years if he goes to the gradual pullout he's talking about, and just at least convince themselves that he's come to thoughtful conclusions about U.S. activity in the Middle East.
Okay, Chris, well done. Thanks. Stay here on News OK TV for more coverage of Campaign 2008.